With another loss to the Edmonton Oilers, the LA Kings seem to be right back to where they finished the last 3 seasons, looking for the answers on how to defeat one of the prospective top teams of the West in the first round of the NHL playoffs. Last night was a stark reminder while the success of the regular season has been a mainstay for the Kings, none of that matters when it comes to the playoffs, especially against a team that has your number. The Kings have not won a playoff series since their 2014 Stanley Cup championship. What was once a dominant team in the early 2010s is now looking at an aging core, questionable contracts, and an unsettling goaltending situation. Can GM Rob Blake and co. right the ship and deliver a series win to justify his recent contract signings? Or are Kings fans destined to suffer through another first-round exit, potentially a four-peat against Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers? As of day of the recording, the Kings find themselves third in the Pacific and locked in with a playoff spot against, you guessed it, the Edmonton Oilers. If we look over the past 3 years, on January 14th, the Kings have found themselves in the same spot in the standings each of those seasons. The Kings continue to find themselves in a position where they are in the hunt as they approach a trade deadline due to a consistent track record during the regular season. This is evident as As of day of recording, the Kings find themselves third in the Pacific and locked in. As of day of recording, the Kings find themselves third in the Pacific and locked in a playoff spot against, you guessed it, the Edmonton Oilers. If we look over the past 3 years, on January 14th, the Kings have found themselves in the same spot in the standings in each of those seasons. The Kings continue to find themselves in a position where they are in the hunt as they approach a trade deadline due to a consistent track record during the regular season. This is evident as they've had a 135-79 record in the regular season during this period. The playoff record is less to be desired. In the last 3 series, all against Edmonton, they have a record of 6-12. What is the most glaring difference between the regular season success compared to the playoffs? Last 3 years, the Kings averaged 3 goals per game while limiting their opponents during the regular season to about 2.7. While in the playoffs, the Kings have been averaging 2.7 goals per game while letting the Oilers average over 4 goals a game. There are many elements at play, but quite simply, the Kings have an issue with goal scoring and goaltending, and it should be the number one thing on GM Rob Blake's mind as we approach a trade deadline. But what can we expect from this trade deadline, and can past deadlines give us any insight? One thing that is for sure is that GM Rob Blake does not have an extensive track record when it comes to dealing during the trade deadline. During his tenure as the GM of the Kings that spans back since 2017, he has presided over 42 trades where 25 of them have occurred during the regular seasons. When GM Rob Blake was hired to take over the Kings, he was tasked to take over the budget led by Dean Lombardi, the aggressive GM that brought over players like Gaborik, Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, who each would play a major factor in both the 2012 and 2014 Stanley Cup final runs. GM Rob Blake wasted no time, as in his first 3 years, he would deal popular names like Kyle Clifford, Tyler Toffoli, Alec Martinez, Jake Muzzin, and Jeff Carter. It wasn't until the summer of 2021 where he began to use those assets collected during those deals to acquire talent to build around the remaining core, with a deal with the Predators to get Victor Arvidsson, and the following summer with the Wild to get Kevin Fiala. Prior to the 2023 trade deadline, GM Rob Blake used the deadline to offload contracts, acquire assets, and stack the chips for future deadlines. But the deadline of 2023 would prove to be his most famous trade as a GM of the Los Angeles Kings, as he would deal future Hall of Famer Jonathan Quick and a first-round pick for Gavrikov and goaltender Jonas Korpisalo. Quick would then get flipped to Vegas Golden Knights, and the rest is history with that. But there is no other trade deadline deal that can even compare to this deal during GM Rob Blake's tenure with Kings. This move was a difficult but necessary one, as the Kings were struggling with finding a consistent goaltender, often rotating 3 at multiple times throughout the season. Korpisalo was an additional piece of the puzzle, as Gavrikov was a highly touted defensive addition to any team, but the trade did solidify the goaltending in short for the Kings. What this trade showed was that GM Rob Blake did not care about the optics or what the fanbase thought about trading its future Hall of Fame goaltender. The team was struggling, but so was Quick, and the ability to upgrade the defense and get back a goalie that can jive within a timeshare was just too much to pass up. This trade would set up a list of trades that GM Rob Blake would do over the next year and a half that would leverage the assets he acquired during the dismantling of the Stanley Cup teams and parlaying them into a team that takes parlaying them into the team that takes the ice today. The question now is, what can GM Rob Blake do this trade deadline so that this season does not end up in the same disappointment as the previous 3 early playoff exits? Looking ahead to this year's trade deadline, the Kings are in a tight spot. Currently, according to Puckpedia, projected cap space is looking at a negative $92,000. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. And if we look at the Kings team right now, a lot of contracts are locked in, with the remaining core of Kopitar, Kempe, Kevin Fiala, all withholding high salary caps. One thing of note is probably the biggest addition that the Kings can make during this trade deadline is getting back a healthy Drew Doughty. But with the addition of Drew Doughty, we are looking at a shortening of the bench and a shortening of a defensive position. Jordan Spence at times has shown that he can fill in the second power play unit, but did struggle at the beginning of the season. I think if the Kings were to make any solid moves during this trade deadline, it may be time to move from established pieces in order to go get a legitimate scorer, maybe on the first or second power play. Names like Trevor Moore can be floated out under a respectable contract at $4.2 million per year. Just signed a contract with the Kings, homegrown talent, but he could be paired with our 7th defenseman, whether it's Jordan Spence or Kyle Burrows, Andres England, who's going to be a free agent this next year. Or if Kings were looking to shed a little contract and be able to retain a little bit extra money to go get a top-fledged scorer, Gavrikov. This is going to be his last season with the LA Kings, with his contract going to be expired next year, becoming a free agent. The Kings don't have the opportunity to take on money. If the Kings are looking to really make an impact, whether it's through getting an established goal scorer like they struggled during the playoffs, or a goaltender, it's going to have to be moving out pieces that may have been within the long-term view of this team. Like I mentioned, Trevor Moore, or a defenseman like Jordan Spence, or Gavrikov. If the Kings don't feel like they have the finances to sign him back. So Rob Blake is in a tough spot here given the cap. But as I mentioned, the biggest addition potentially that could shore up the defense and could shore up the goaltending could be the addition of Drew Doughty as soon as he returns from his long-term IR stint. Now, let me add in some personal bias here. As a Kings fan, I've seen this same song and dance every single year. The Kings are built for the regular season. They're built to be able to travel, be able to come into an away stadium, be able to dictate their pace of play, and be able to win games. They have a more balanced lineup this year. They are scoring a little bit more than usual. Their defense has been better, but when it comes to playoff hockey, there's a certain amount of skill that is needed. There are bigger moments. You need to have the best player on the ice. And the Kings, probably since their Stanley Cup run, they don't have the best player on the ice pretty much in any series, and especially in series against the Edmonton Oilers when you have Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid. For this Kings team to really make an impact during this trade deadline, they have to get risky. And I really don't think, given what happened this past year with the trade for PL Dubois and then eventually shipping him out during this past summer, that Rob Blake can't afford to really do that. This team is a lot younger than last year. A lot of homegrown talents are on the lineup, and they've been performing well. But there are some spots in the lineup that are expendable. Trevor Moore was injured at the start of this year. Now, I don't know where he fits into this formula. There are options here where Rob Blake can get risky, but if I know my Kings and I know Rob Blake, I'm worried that this is going to be another disappointing year. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's a trade out there that I don't see. Leave a comment below. Please drop a like, subscribe. Thank you so much for checking this out.